What's up, St. John and beyond? It's Father Jonathan, and today we are continuing the series that we started last week on the fruit of the Spirit. And the fruit of the Spirit that I want to talk about today goes by a number of different names. Sometimes it's referred to as mildness, sometimes it's referred to as gentleness. Perhaps the more familiar in the older sense from the King James language would be meekness. Sometimes this fruit of the Spirit is referred to as meekness, which connects us back to the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount when he said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." So what is this particular fruit of the Spirit, and how can we cultivate it in ourselves? Well, if you think about meekness, it's not something that everybody quite understands right away when you hear the word. I mean, you may not get it immediately, but if you do have some association with it, you might think of, and many people do, think of something weak and kind of intimidated, right? So you think of a mouse, kind of running away or something like that, or someone who is just absolutely pathetic, with the big kind of pathetic eyes and who really can't help themselves. That's who we think of as meek, which is not exactly something that we celebrate in our society. Usually what we celebrate is strength and self-reliance and being resilient and being able to handle anything, right? Not being weak or being somebody who can be easily harmed in some way. That's certainly not something that we usually celebrate. But that's not what meekness is actually about, at least not all the way, right? To be meek is not just about being willing to be weak, although that is a piece of it, that we have to be willing to be weak in certain circumstances and certain situations. But meekness is actually much more about our own internal confidence in who we are as children of God in Christ. In other words, it's about us really understanding that the whole point of our lives is our movement towards heaven, our movement towards being with God in Christ, that's what our lives are about, and that's who we are, right? I mean, if you get asked who you are, you can answer that in a lot of different ways. And all of them may be true on some level, but the ultimate answer, the most important answer for you, if you are a Christian, if you are a baptized person, if you are a member of the church, the most important answer is, who am I? I am a child of God in Christ. I am one with God in Christ Jesus. That's who I am. That's where I'm headed. And if you have that confidence within yourself, if you have that kind of faith and trust, you can endure a lot of things without flying off the handle. So maybe the best way to understand what meekness is about is to think about what the opposite of meekness would be. Many of us face situations in which we have to deal with somebody being unfair to us, right? And so maybe there are people in your lives like that. Maybe there's a person, maybe there's a particular person in your family life, or in your school life, or in some other corner of your life, who is just always picking on you, always unfair to you, always just being terrible to you, and you don't like it, right? And you shouldn't like it. But what's the response? What's the thing that you would like to change? Well, obviously, I'd like it if Bobby stopped telling lies about me. I'd like it if Susie would close her big fat mouth whenever I happen to be in the room. I would like there to be an end to what they're doing. But for most of us, it goes beyond that. For most of us, we have this internal reaction when somebody's being unfair to us, that we not only want them to stop being unfair to us, but we want them to be punished for it. We want them to know just how terrible they're being and how stupid they're being. We want other people to know how terrible and stupid they're being, right? Like, we want them held up to ridicule. We want this whole situation turned upside down. This, I think, has had a profound effect on how human beings relate to each other in the era we live in, especially in the era of social media, right? Because it's very easy to fly off the handle in social media, especially because the person's not sitting right in front of you. And so you see somebody say something, and it may not even be directed to you, but they say something that you think is stupid or dangerous or inappropriate or whatever, and your immediate desire is to respond in such a way that your own cleverness shows how awful this person is. You know, you want to pile up on them. You want 100 people to like or favorite or otherwise say how much they liked your message about how stupid the other person was. That is the kind of internal reaction we have, and that's a sort of anti-meekness, right? Why? Because if we're meek in the sense that we're talking about here, we have confidence that we're going to be redeemed in Christ Jesus. And so we don't need to be validated by this other person getting smacked down. Doesn't mean that we don't want justice to be done. It doesn't mean that we don't want right to prevail over wrong. But it does mean that we're able to suffer wrong when we have to. And that we're not going to fly off the handle because we know that it's not going to accomplish anything, because my ultimate fate is not dependent on what other people think of me. My ultimate fate is not dependent on whether or not Bobby tells lies about me and whether or not other people believe it, right? My ultimate fate is wrapped up in Jesus Christ. And that's the thing that I need. And so I can let the rest of it go. And not only does this value then of meekness not equate to just being weak or wimpy or pathetic, but it actually equates to the opposite. It equates to great strength. Think of somebody like St. Maximilian Kolbe, right, who was in the concentration camps in World War II, and there the Nazis were about to execute this man who had done nothing wrong. It was really just to prove a point. And Father Maximilian Kolbe came forward and said, "I'm a Catholic priest, I'm celibate, I don't have a family, take me instead of him." And so they did, right? That was meekness. That was meekness. Why? Well, you could say that was strength. Well, absolutely it was strength, but it was also meekness. He was embracing the idea that he would become weak, that he would allow himself to be killed, that he would be basically offering himself up. He could have had the opposite reaction. He could have just run at the guard. This is so unfair that you're doing this to this guy, and try to knock him out or something, and it wouldn't have accomplished anything except probably his death right there and then. But instead, he knew who he was, and he knew what the ultimate value would be. And so he was willing to take a chance on being meek in that moment. This is also something that we're called to. So how do we cultivate that? How do we bring that fruit of the Spirit out of us? Well, it starts by praying on a daily basis, maybe even on an hourly basis sometimes, to remember who we are. To be constantly saying, in our prayer life, I am a child of God in Christ Jesus. That is who I am. That is where I'm going. That is the ultimate reality. Everything else I think is reality is secondary to that. That is the truth. The more we can be reminded of that, the more it changes our behavior. Secondarily, to be able to have some of these same sorts of prayers ready to go right before we walk into what could be a triggering situation. So, okay, I know I'm going to see Bobby today. I feel bad if anybody is named Bobby who's watching this video, by the way. This is not directed at you. I just picked a name out of a hat. Anyway, I know I'm going to see Bobby today. I know he's going to give me a hard time. Lord, please help me to remember that I am your child, that ultimate reality is all about how I relate to you and what you've done for me, and that I don't have to be swayed internally by whatever is going to happen next. Give me the calmness I need. Give me the meekness I need to deal with this situation. You could do the same thing in social media. Maybe not to that extent, but pray before you go online, before you go on social media. Pray and remind yourself of who you are. Every time you're about to hit send or enter on something that you're about to say, stop and think. Am I acting as if ultimate reality is the fact that I've been redeemed in Christ, or am I acting as if ultimate reality is tied up with whatever this person has just said to me? Think about that and pray about it. And you may find that it changes the way that you approach going online, talking to people, going into these various social interactions. And it may make things actually a lot better for you, both internally and externally, in your relationships with people. Hope you guys are doing well. Stay home, stay safe, wash your hands. We'll be back with another one of these videos hopefully tomorrow. Until then, grace, peace, and love.